I have some concerns about the bill that I'd like to express. I think this has the potential to be one of the most harmful bills I've seen in the state in the time I've been around the legislative process. I think it might be fiscally unwise and harmful as well in the long run. Our state budget is an odd character, and push it in one place and it pops out somewhere else, and this bill is just, that's going to happen in this bill. I'm thinking that one thing that I have a problem with is the elderly waiver cuts and assisted living. For an example of how well those programs work, my husband and I took care of his mother for 6.5 years in our home, and we were able to do that because we got a few services for her during that time. In that 6.5 years that she would have spent in a nursing home, she only ended up spending the last 3 weeks in a nursing home. That saved the state thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars probably in that time. My opponent in the last race, in the general election, she also is taking care of her mother, and her mother has Alzheimer's, and she's been living in her home rather than a nursing home for the last 3 years. It's because of some of those elderly services that the state helps pay for. That she's able to do that. And there's many other examples of that, people in my district who are keeping people at home with them, or that they're in assisted living and getting some services that can keep them out of a nursing home. So I really have a problem with cuts to that, because ultimately it's going to cost a lot more. I'm concerned that this is a rationing of health care in other parts of the bill. The cuts to mental illness are particularly profoundly wrong, in my opinion, and I think a little history here is helpful. Before I ever worked at the legislature, the legislature had ordered a study of the deinstitutionalization of the state hospitals, and the governor had ordered it as well in 1984, and I worked on that study, and we took a look at what the costs were of the state hospitals. There were at one point 10 state hospitals, and what it would cost to deinstitutionalize those folks, get them back in the community, both people with developmental disabilities and mental illness. And we looked at the history of the state institutions, and not long after Minnesota became a state, St. Peter was the first hospital to open, now in Senator Sharon's district, and then there were several more to follow. We did the study as a result of a court case. The state of Minnesota was being sued for the way that people with developmental disabilities were treated in state institutions. And the court case said the state of Minnesota had to do something to change that, had to get more community-based services and get some of these folks out of these state hospitals. Democrats and Republicans have worked on this together over the years to provide this, what I think is a very thin safety net. It sounds like a lot of money that we're spending, but compared to what it's going to cost all of us in the long run, and what it would have cost us had we kept doing things the old way, I think it's probably a very good deal for the people in Minnesota, and particularly the people that need health care. The way state hospitals this is how far we've come. The way state institutions used to be, they were called institutions for idiots, imbeciles, and the insane. And that's what it said right on the hospital, idiots, imbeciles, and the insane. And that was in the late 80s and early, and I'm sure, Mr. Secretary, you've heard this before. In those institutions, you could put people in those institutions. You could put your husband in the institution, have him committed if you thought he was kind of a jerk. Or you could put your wife in the institution if you had a girlfriend on the side and you didn't want her around. You could put your child in an institution like that if they were deaf or hard of hearing or had a little autism or whatever, and that's where they stayed for the rest of their lives. And they were full. And the folks in those institutions were used as human guinea pigs. Any kind of new treatment, lobotomies, electric shock treatments, trazodone, all the new drugs were tried on these people.
Point of order. Pardon me, Senator Goodwin. I believe
Senator Limmer.
Mr. President, I believe that The debate is supposed to be on the issue before us, not a trip down memory lane about the way we handle people with mental disabilities, talking about labels on hospital buildings and things like that. Could you please keep your comments to the bill before us?
Yes, and this is part of it, and I think we can't know where we're going till we know where we've been, so we don't make the same mistakes again, Senator Limmer, so I hope you understand that. When we deinstitutionalized the hospitals in the mid-'80s, what we said is we're going to develop community-based services for people with disabilities and for people with mental illness. Well, we developed some pretty good community-based services for people with developmental disabilities, but we didn't do so well for people with mental illness. We're still waiting for a lot of those services. In my community, and the mental health cuts, to get back to the point, the mental health cuts in this bill are going to be harmful. In 1949, a Republican governor, Governor Youngdahl, brought the entire legislature to the state hospital so they could see how badly people were treated, how they were tied to beds, how they were in their own feces, and so on and on. The entire legislature. Governor Youngdahl made some great changes in the way people were treated in institutions. And so did Governor Perpich by putting some community-based services out there and starting that process. And so did Governor Carlson by working on Minnesota Care program. So we've had Republicans and Democrats that have done a really good job with developing at least a thin safety net in this state. And I think that's about all it is, because there's still a lot of holes in it that people are falling through. But this bill makes those holes even bigger. This bill makes a hula hoop out of the safety net. And I think the thing you have to remember is that we promised people in the 80s, we promised people that we would develop these services. And like I said, we did so for developmental disabilities. But we have people that have mental illness now that are sleeping on the streets. We didn't find places for them. We have people that are in prison. We have people that are in jails. That's where the costs pop up. We have children that can't get mental health help. 1 out of 4 children in the state of Minnesota has a mental health problem sometime in their life. 1 out of 5 adults. If we don't take care of these in the most basic way, through mental health grants, through developing some additional services in our community, we're going to take care of it down the road, and it's going to be very expensive. We're going to take care of it in our private health insurance. We're going to take care of it in our psychiatric hospitals, in our emergency rooms. We can prevent a lot of problems from getting worse if we just will make sure and pay attention to the promises we made to help people have some kind of service available. I was trying to help a woman in my district find some services for her son last week, and I got to tell you, she didn't have any insurance, and she had just lost her job, so she had to wait 4 months to get on Minnesota Care, and he needed mental health services very badly. He was suicidal, and we searched and searched, and there was some county services, but she would have to wait to get those. And she is very nervous about what might happen to her son between now and the time she can get some help for him. When I worked at Hennepin County in children's mental health, we had one boy that tried suicide 25 times. He cut his wrist. He tried to choke himself. He tried to hang himself. His mother would find him like this oftentimes when she'd come home from work. She'd find him passed out or had taken a lot of pills and had to rush him to the hospital. We have issues like that we have to deal with in the state. We can't just say, we don't have the money, we can't deal with it. We have to have basic services at the very least for health care, and we cannot get rid of the safety net in the health care area. It's just too cruel. It's just too cruel to say to people, look, you can't bring your child, even if you have if you had Minnesota Care, you're just going to have a voucher now. You're just going to have your health care rations. So don't get any unless you can afford the co-pays and the deductibles and so forth. So don't bring your child to the doctor. Don't go get that prenatal care because, you're going to have to pay the bill. Don't go bring that child when they're having an asthma attack because you're going to have to pay the bill. And if you don't have the money, a lot of people are losing their homes for health care costs, not just because of the economy and the way the financial market handled them. So the ramifications are huge, huge for what we're doing here. We need to think about the people that will, these are papers, but these papers are people. They're people and their children and their babies. And I got to tell you, we can easily just dismiss this and talk about it, or we can say this is just an emotional ranting. But these are people, folks, 138,000 people that, for all practical purposes, do not have health care. All these people that will not get mental health grants. All these people that will be in nursing homes instead of in assisted living or living with their family and getting some help. These are people, these aren't fiscally wise decisions in so many ways. We might not have the 10 state hospitals for the idiots and the insane and the imbeciles like we used to, but that's because a lot of people put a lot of hard work and logic into how to develop the absolute basic services that we need in our communities. And this bill doesn't do anything to help or encourage that. I know we have to make cuts, and I know this is a huge area of the budget, but it seems to me if we would have put our heads together, rather than having one side make all the decisions and the other side not even being able to make little amendments on it, we're not going to come up with the best product. We're not going to come up with the best product. And I really don't think this is the best product. I think this is, as I said, one of the potentially most harmful bills I've seen. I encourage you a no vote.